So I'm here with Tom Davidoff, who's the UBC professor, director of the Center for Urban Economics and Real Estate at Sauder. You're also one of the guys responsible for the proposal of the property tax surcharge, and also one of the thought leaders here on the Vancouver real estate crisis. So thanks a lot, Tom, for being with us.
Total pleasure. Thanks for putting me on film.
So tonight we are losing this fight. Oh, help our souls tonight. Is no one on our side who's gonna help our souls tonight. No one here to help.
Did I miss anything there? Is there any kind of gaps that you want to fill us in? And I think you actually advised President Obama before on the housing crisis. Is that?
Yeah, there was a step of removal, but I worked at the Council of Economic Advisors dealing with the U.S. housing crisis, which was sort of the opposite. Here we've got a problem that people can't afford homes.
Yeah.
In the U.S., you had a problem with homes were too cheap and people were walking away from their mortgages. Today, we've got the opposite problem, but I think a lot of people, the banks are starting to be concerned, maybe that's the direction we could be heading.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, you're obviously a pretty trusted advisor that, we can rely on you for some good information.
Well, if you look at my history of predictions about this housing market, you might think twice. This is a tough market to predict.
Yeah.
I bought here in 2009 on the North Shore. I thought the market was overvalued, but I'd stay in my house forever.
Yeah.
In fact, the house went up in value a lot. I was out of there in 3 years. I thought I was selling at the top of the market. And look what's happened since then. So this is a tough market to call for anybody.
Yeah, no, I think everyone is kind of in the same boat. I mean, it's really hard to actually make predictions. I think, you always hear like two sides of it. People saying like it's a bubble, it's going to crash any day. And then some people say that it's going to keep going. So,
well, look, we've got essentially, if you think supply-demand diagram, we've got a fixed supply curve, essentially. It is very hard to build new housing, certainly in the city of Vancouver. I mean, with these prices, you should see cranes all over the place.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's new building, but very little. And so when you're not building, even when demand grows, homes are going to sell for what people are willing to pay for the homes.
Yeah.
And economists have tried to model this, but really, there's no correct price for a home in Vancouver. You could write down a perfectly valid economic model of a detached home in Vancouver that says it's worth $800,000 and you can get to $4 million too. It depends what you think the right risk premium, liquidity premium is. Where do you think interest rates are going? So what people should be willing to pay for a home here is an awfully tough exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for like a lot of people, the reality of owning a detached home is kind of in the past.
Bit of a fantasy, so maybe townhome's a better example. But for any product, basically, you're going to divide the net rent, the rent after expenses, by a number. And that number should reflect the riskless interest rate, what you think rents are going to grow by every year, and a risk or liquidity premium, because real estate, of course, you're taking on some risk when you buy it. But you're hedging your future housing expenditures.
Yeah.
So we don't know where riskless rates are going. Rents, that's probably an easy one, probably going to grow a bit more than CPI every year forever. But how much of a risk premium people should be or are entitled to is a tricky one. So where are riskless rates going? What are people going to think the risk premium should be going forward? It's just unknowable. And so there's just so much uncertainty over the fundamental value of a home in Vancouver that I at least as an excuse, I say you can't blame anybody for getting this market wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you a question then. You're talking about risk. Do you think right now people have overextended their risk? Do you think they're taking on too much risk?
Well, it's always a puzzle why there's so much home ownership. Okay, so today you buy a home in Vancouver, the net rent divided by price. If it's a single family home, you're looking at about 1%.
Yeah.
If you're in a townhome, maybe 2.5%. Okay. Maybe you can go at the lower end of the market, get up to a 3% yield net income on price. If you buy a share of RBC stock today, their earnings are about 8%. 8 cents on the dollar. They're paying a dividend of 4. Am I confident that rents are going to grow faster in Vancouver than the earnings of financial institutions? I'm not confident of that. So and you look at Seattle, there the dividend yield is much higher. So why is Vancouver so much more expensive than a city like Seattle, or in terms of rent to price, far worse than a city like San Francisco, where all the same stories of desirable place, very hard to build, apply?
Yeah.
The point being, prices could keep going here, but there's a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And buyers who are, especially first-time buyers, typically they put 10% down, and they've stretched to get that, probably borrowed money from mom and dad or taken a gift. And so essentially, they're putting 1,000% of their wealth into a single asset that's tremendously risky.
Pretty, definitely.
So
I think
that is a real concern. And, kids today, which I guess I'll call anybody under 30, has never seen a 5%, 7%, 10% mortgage interest rate.
Yeah.
I'm not an old guy, but when I first bought a house, my realtor was saying, wow, just psychologically, if interest rates go below 7%, people are going to go bananas.
Yeah.
Now, I took a fixed rate mortgage at 7%. I thought, my God, I'll never see a rate like this again.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I think definitely for like a lot of people, I mean, I think for a lot of people that rentals actually do make a lot more sense in home ownership given, certain situations. I think that a lot of people have also been sold kind of the Canadian dream of home ownership. A lot of it right now that's driving the demand, I think, is a fear of missing out, seeing the prices keep going up, interest rates being low, having mom and dad cash out of their big homes, taking some of that to help finance some of the down payment and that sort of thing.
I think we've really got a tale of two demand curves in Vancouver. If I was in China today, or Russia, or Saudi Arabia, I've got a dictatorial government that can steal my money at any time. I can't trust the financial institutions where I would park my wealth. I can't breathe the air. I'm not allowed to speak my mind. Of course, I'm going to bring my money and my family wherever I can. And Canada is a very friendly place for investors from overseas. So there is a real and true story that Vancouver housing prices can escalate. There's a long ways to go. We're still cheaper than Shanghai or Beijing by a lot. And yet, if we're the nicest city in China, we maybe ought to be as expensive or more than those cities. That said, typically, housing markets are dominated by locals. And if you compare Vancouver to a Seattle or San Francisco, we're massively overpriced. So domestic demand on its own, you're hearing, like you say, fear of missing out. You're hearing about parents pulling out their home equity to pre-purchase a home for their kid who's currently in high school or elementary school because they believe that Vancouver real estate is just by far the greatest asset in the world and nothing beats Vancouver real estate. That has bubble written all over it. So I think as long as the foreign demand continues to be strong, things are going to be okay. But that demand, while strong in the long run, can be quite volatile and subject to exchange rates and dictator Xi's whims in China. So I don't think there'll be a correction, but there could be, and it could be a big one.
Yeah, okay, good to hear. I mean, I guess we've kind of discussed like a little bit about this, but in your opinion, based on what you know, what is the main driver of these sky-high prices?
Okay.
If you had to pick, I guess, maybe one source.
One source, look. People talk
Maybe
about
two sources.
People talk about housing supply. If it was easy to build whatever you wanted, and if people didn't care if they were deep into the Fraser Valley or in Point Grey, so if location didn't matter and it wasn't a pain in the neck to get permits and there weren't oceans and mountains in the way, then when demand shifts out, you just build more houses and prices don't grow. So our supply constraints, some of which God gave us and many of which are self-inflicted, are important. But supply constraints didn't get 40% worse over the last 12 months. There was an exodus of money from China, and the loonie did get quite a bit weaker as oil crashed. Okay, so foreign money, I don't think there's any question, is the key reason we've had an escalation in home prices. Now, a lot of people will say, hey, sure, on the west side of Vancouver, the for sale signs are all in Chinese. But if you go to the Fraser Valley, you get some Indian buyers in Surrey, but pretty much it's a domestic market. But think about that domestic market, okay? You've got tremendous home equity gains for people on the west side, the homeowners selling to the Chinese. Single family homes that, again, in a Seattle cost $800,000, $1 million, selling for $4 or $5 million here. And these were purchased at low prices. So you got huge home equity. You can take the home equity loan, get the down payment for your kid. That pushes up housing prices. You can trade down and that pushes up housing prices. You sell out for the high-end buyer, you buy the townhome, that pushes the townhome buyer further out into East Van, and eventually you get a chain into the less desirable areas. And I think most important, what you mentioned, the fear of missing out. When people see these home price gains in this liquidity, they think, wow, look what happened to prices in the last year. If I don't buy today, I'm going to miss out on 40% appreciation every year. And of course, if you think prices are going to grow 40% a year, you'd be out of your mind not to buy.
Exactly.
So the psychology and the liquidity induced by probably not a majority of buyers, but a significant number from overseas, I think is absolutely the story of the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think it's like a total trickle effect. I mean, you look at areas that are getting multiple offers like Mission, Langley, Maple Ridge, Abbotsford. I mean, those are not your typical areas that are, escalating like crazy in price and then multiple offers. So I think it's a total trickle effect. You look at like Vancouver condos, those are all multiple offers. That's rarely been seen before. Yeah. So, I think it's...
What you worry about is price escalation where the long-term value isn't there. And that's what we saw in the States, and that's what really is concerning. Look, if Point Grey homes cost $6 million, the right value for a Point Grey home is totally unknowable. It's a luxury product. I can't tell you it's overvalued. However, homes in neighborhoods where it's easy to build more homes, that's a problem. When the location value isn't there, you can just keep sprawling out. People are going to build, and eventually prices are going to look like construction costs. You had appreciation in the U.S. It was just horrible to see in the Central Valley of California, where there's plenty of land. It's a piece of cake to build, and you really can't commute to the Bay Area or to Los Angeles. And you see price growth there, and you think these houses should cost replacement cost. When the land values start to really escalate in dodgy markets, not to say Langley's a dodgy place, I don't mean to demean it, but in markets where the long-term value play is a little harder to characterize, you start to worry. I don't think we're at the craziness of the U.S. I think these locations are good. We're not seeing the subprime, terrible quality mortgages to the same extent as the States, but I think we are certainly risking, that vicinity.
Yeah, I think it was like the same thing, wasn't it, in like Phoenix?
And
then they started doing the old supply and demand and building, and then they had too many.
Vancouver, like San Francisco, there's a very compelling value story to tell. When you start to see purchases out in other places where it's harder to tell the story, you worry. And the sad thing about that is it's the first-time buyers, it's the lower-income buyers who are so-called drive-to-qualify borrowers who have to go further out for affordability, and they're the ones who are going to be hurt in a price decline, and that's the sad thing. That said, things could keep rocking if the foreign demand stays strong, and that may be the likeliest scenario. So hopefully things work out for people and we find a way to help with affordability at the same time.
No, totally. I think so. I mean, what was your solution? I mean, I know it, obviously, the property surcharge tax, but for somebody watching this, can you kind of explain it in like a little more detail, and then maybe why? I mean, I'm sure you obviously feel like that's probably the best solution at this moment.
Sure. So it comes to basic supply and demand economics. The government has to raise revenue. Obviously, our current government in Victoria isn't particularly interested in raising revenue. They're a small government approach, which is fine, but you do have taxes here. Income taxes are quite high. Sales tax is high. You go down to the States and it's a pleasant surprise, and you'd be surprised how much of your paycheck you keep there. So you got to tax something. And then the question is, what do you tax? In a market where you're really not allowed to build anything, taxing real estate's a great idea. You want to tax the stuff that can't run away from the tax. When you tax stuff that runs away, you lose your economic base, you distort people's decisions, and you don't make any money as a government. So property taxes here should be higher than almost anywhere else because it's so hard to build as a percent of value, forget as a dollar amount. When I moved here from California, which has Prop 13 and actually an artificially low property tax environment, I was paying $10K a year on a house that I had purchased for $700,000. When I opened up my property tax bill in North Vancouver, I thought it was the monthly bill. I couldn't believe how low it was. But of course, when I opened up my paycheck and saw what I was kicking upstairs to the feds and to the province, it was a very different story. So for a long time, I believe we ought to have property tax reform, cut income taxes and sales taxes, raise property taxes. So you're not taking any more money from people. You're just concentrating the tax on the activity that can't run away from the tax. Imagine what a booming, awesome economy we could have with much lower income and sales taxes here. Okay. That's not going to happen because it would hurt retired homeowners. And hurting retired homeowners is like taking the express train to losing an election. And politicians will never do it. When we saw the very powerful effect overseas demand is having on the market, and people have had different views, but I think the last 12 months has dispelled any idea that it's a small part of the market, we said, look, let's raise property taxes on people who aren't subject to the high income and sales taxes here. That is astronaut families where the income is earned overseas. You see these maps people have been putting on Twitter where, there's a lot of poverty apparently down in Shaughnessy even, or Arbutus, where you've got multi-million-dollar houses, but apparently there's lots of low-income families. Obviously there's a lot of income and wealth there, but it's overseas, not here. So we say for a family structure like that, be it a vacant home, an astronaut family, a vacation property, you've got to pay a 1.5% extra property tax surcharge. That takes you to about 2%. Now, what's going to happen? A lot of people say, oh, that's peanuts. 1.5% is nothing. Well, it's not nothing, right? If the dividend yield is 2.5%, an extra tax of 1.5%, that's a serious fraction. That's more than half the dividend yield. So what's going to happen? Well, maybe overseas buyers run away. The problem with that is if they do run away, that pushes down housing prices. A lot of people think that won't be the response. The other response is a family that currently leaves a property vacant or uses it for vacation or for their kid to go to school says, we want to make the investment, but I don't want to pay that tax. If you rent the property out under our proposal, every dollar of gross income that you report to CRA is a dollar for dollar credit against the 1.5%. So if you're a landlord, you're pretty much absolved of any new tax responsibility. So you could transition underutilized property to rental, and rental is really the key to affordability. So that's one channel. The other channel is people say, you know what? I want my kid who goes to UBC or Simon Fraser to be living in a $30 million house. I'll pay the $600K or whatever it is per year in tax because I'm rich and I don't care. Well, that would be the best alternative of all. Don't change people's behavior, but you get a whole bunch of money. You could then lower income or sales taxes. You could write a rebate check. You could build affordable housing out in the suburbs on SkyTrain. So free money is the best thing in the world for affordability because affordability means you don't have enough money.
I think
so that's one option. So,
you think you quoted what is going to generate potentially around 90 to 100 million?
You know, that was under very conservative assumptions. We thought $100 million a year in Vancouver, and that was before we had looked at the recent price explosion. The higher end would be about $1 billion a year just in the city of Vancouver. I saw somebody tried to be a little bit more careful, something like $250 million a year. It's serious money. And it's there for the taking. And I don't think anybody would mind. I think, you know, people are coming here to Canada with money and resources, and they're grateful to be here. And I don't think there'd be a lot of resentment towards people being asked to contribute here. So we think it's a real win. We got about 50 local economists to sign in. I should add, nobody who's been here a long time needs to worry. If you've lived in your residence for a long period, so somebody who's working class, struggled, bought a home, paid off a lot of the mortgage. If you've been in your home 5 or 10 years, whatever politicians want to set, we've said you're exempt. If you're on the Canada Pension Plan or Old Age Security, so you paid into the retirement system, you're an older owner, obviously you don't have the cash flow to pay this, you're totally off the hook. It's just affluent people who don't live and work here and never have who are subject to the tax. And we don't tie it to nationality, which we think is great. We think Canada should be a welcoming society. I personally am not yet a citizen. I came here on a work permit. And I wasn't eligible for the homeowner's grant, despite paying big-time taxes for my job. Under this proposal, every dollar of income tax that I pay, again, is a credit against the BC Housing Affordability Fund surcharge. So anybody who pays serious income tax is, again, totally off the hook.
Yeah.
So we think it's a fantastic plan. We got about 50 economists at Simon Fraser and UBC signed off on it. David Eby put this up as a member's bill. I think if you ask most mayors, they'd support it.
Yeah.
The province, unfortunately, has been a little bit slow to adopt this. They're terrified of anything that can reduce home equity. I understand that perspective, but there's a dial you can turn. Mm-hmm. If you set our tax to 5% a year, no one who doesn't live and work here is going to buy a property to do anything other than rent it out, because you can't pay 5% a year on a dividend paying 2.5%. It would be a killer. That would be okay. That would be fantastic for affordability. We'd turn Vancouver to a locals market.
Exactly.
But I think it really would depress home values. The other way you can go is to turn the dial low. Set it to 0.25% a year, 0.5% a year. No one's going to run away from an extra 0.25% property tax, especially if you're desperate to get your money out of whatever homeland you're coming from. And so then it's free money.
Yeah, so you propose 1.5%, but you're saying that you can either turn it up higher, or you can go lower to say 0.5% or something like that.
Turn it up, you get maximum impact on affordability. You're going to chase off overseas buyers or convert them into landlords, which would be, I think, the best case. I think foreign people investing into this market and buying rental property is actually great. Turn the dial low, you get some money, a little bit less than we think you'd get at 1.5%. But you get some free money. So to do nothing, I think, is borderline inexcusable.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, obviously you have a lot of people that are in favor of this, but what's the deal with the provincial government? Like, has anyone actually reached out to you for, like, further comment, or, like, has Christy Clark, or what's the deal with
They've
that?
given us a good listen. We've had the opportunity to address high-level officials in government. We had some support. There's been dialogue. I'm not a Kremlinologist, so I don't want to speculate on what the internal dialogue has been, but I think it's under consideration, and I'll be interested to see where it goes.
Okay, interesting. So I want to get into a little bit of kind of the roundtable discussion that you were involved in last week with Justin Trudeau was there. So I guess to my understanding that Christy Clark and the provincial members weren't in attendance.
Nobody from the province, nobody from the city. This was the federal government looking to get educated by the development community, the academic community, and the not-for-profit community.
Okay, so I mean, what did you take away from that? Like, is there anything in particular that you felt like were they all ears kind of thing, or was your property surcharge kind of one of the main topics, or I mean, what did you take away from that?
Trudeau was actively listening. You know, I came in with two goals. We've talked about the BC Housing Affordability Fund. I think tax reform is absolutely critical. I was not the only one at the table pointing out. Somebody said, why put your money in Panama when you can go to Granville and 41st? It's so easy to hide money from overseas in Vancouver real estate and pay no tax. The CRA doesn't audit. I mean, you'd think you'd trigger an audit if you buy a $5 million house and then don't pay any income tax. Like, it doesn't add up. But I think CRA doesn't touch that. But of course, if you declare, you don't have kids yet probably, if you declare $100 for the sports amount because your kid was in a soccer league, they'll be all over you. So, you know, the federal government really is just totally saying, bring it on. And so there was a lot of that. Obviously, our tax structure has the advantage of asking for a contribution from rich guys who buy real estate here, which is a scarce good. And we get the data we need. And I pointed out, look, you know, Minister de Jong has created a new tick box that says, yes, I'm a foreign buyer who's laundering money. Of course, nobody's going to tick that box. We learned, you know, people are buying properties through attorneys. They set up shell corporations here. So nobody buys a property as an overseas buyer.
Shell corporation.
So we're going to learn zero when we find out, oh, surprise, surprise, nobody is a self-declared money launderer from overseas.
Exactly.
So we talked about the data need. The thing that really surprised me was there was certainly receptivity to some kind of tax reform around the table. But I thought land use was important. And some people told me, you know, don't talk about land use. That's just a municipal issue. I disagree. Of course, the province needs to change cities' charters. And just to take a step back, when I say land use, I'm not sure people appreciate what a catastrophic waste of opportunity zoning laws are in the Lower Mainland. So if you go about 8 blocks south of here, past 16th Avenue, say between 16th and King Ed, between, I don't know, Burrard and Alma, you've got single-family zoning. There's no views.
Yeah.
And you've got big lots with giant single-family homes. And a reaction when you walk around the neighborhood and see these, I don't know, what do they sell for, $6-7 million bucks a pop? You see these houses, you say, I'm such a failure. If only I'd worked harder, I'd be able to live in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
But of course I can't buy this home and I never will be able to. Not so fast. That is the farthest thing from the free market you'll ever see. In a free market, all that land would be 50-story apartment buildings. Look, it costs what, $200-300 a square foot to build. You sell there for easy $1,000 a square foot. Why would you stop at a single-family home?
Yeah.
You'd be out of your mind. It's a ridiculous waste of real estate. Okay, now you might say, oh, you have to preserve the amenity. Preserve the amenity for who?
Yeah.
95% of Canadian couples earn less than $200,000 a year. On $200,000 a year, it's a stretch to pay $2 million for a house, a real stretch. So houses that sell for $5 million, the city is saying the market can't build affordable housing there. It's forbidden. You cannot build units that anybody in Canada can afford. You must build a giant single-family mansion for a rich guy who doesn't make their money here. Just imagine that governments, every day the mayor, the city planning department wake up and ban affordable housing on most of the land in Vancouver. It's unbelievable. So what now? But that's...
I think that's a little bit like putting people's expectations back in place. Because I was at one of the city meetings, and Bob Rennie was kind of encouraging densification there in areas like Dunbar, and there seemed to be like a lot of resistance from people that actually, I guess, were living in the Dunbar area.
Of course.
So but like you have to be realistic. Is like how many people can actually afford a detached house in Dunbar and then all these sorts of areas, right?
And nobody's telling you can't have your single-family home.
Yeah.
It's just a question of should you be allowed to dictate, I want to preserve the character of my neighborhood.
Yeah.
You're not going to preserve the character of your neighborhood. The character of your neighborhood 20 years ago was middle-class families, upper middle class, with nice houses. But this is jumbo luxury mansions for a totally different class of buyer. It's going to be playground for the global elite. That's not preserving character, and that architecture is not preserving any kind of character. So anyway, what can the feds do about it? And what Trudeau clearly heard, which I thought was very clever, is the federal government, while they can't set zoning policy, they can say, we'd like to give you some transit funding. We'd like to give you maybe extra education funding, this funding, that funding. You're not getting a penny until you build adequate density. Certainly near SkyTrain stations. If we're going to build you a SkyTrain station, you can't maintain luxury, non-affordable housing only. Okay? So Trudeau clearly heard that, and the clever thing he heard is the mayors would like him to tie their hands. Gregor Robertson is not a bad guy. He's a smart guy who cares about the environment. And of course, chopping off 49 out of 50 stories on a building just forces people to scatter into the suburbs.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like that. Not that you go to 50 stories, maybe 25, 10, 5.
Yeah, totally.
Because there is a trade-off. Obviously, you want some environmental quality. But there's no quality there for anybody who lives and works here because they can't afford it. So he'd like to fix that, but he can't because anytime he tries to change zoning, like in Marpole, the local owners who are rich and politically connected and active and loud, it's the torches and the pitchforks. So Robertson can't do what he wants to do. If the Fed stepped in and said, sorry, Gregor, you're not allowed to do this, what I call snob zoning, where you ban affordable housing, we're not going to give you any money, he can then credibly go back to the voters and say, hey, he's the bad guy. And Trudeau, at the end of the meeting, I was very impressed. He understood all this, and he said, yep, I'm willing to play the heavy. And I thought that was a fantastic outcome from the meeting. So I know he's sending ministers in for follow-up. I hope they'll act on tax. I hope they'll act on audit. But I'm optimistic that they really may act on land use, which is probably not the biggest issue for the last year, but in the long run, quite important.
So what would you say, what does the future hold for Vancouver if prices keep escalating?
Playground for the rich. And I think, look, 50 years from now, we've had a good run of it in North America. Other countries around the world didn't have their act together. They were non-market. They didn't have rule of law. I remember when I graduated college, I went to a good university, and I saw the sort of meathead frat guys who were about to get $100,000 a year on Wall Street. And this was just as the wall had come down and Russia was starting to move towards a market economy. I thought, wait a second, there's like armies of unemployed nuclear physicists in Russia who'd take $200 a year and would do a much better job than these guys analyzing securities. How much longer is this going to last?
Yeah.
And globalization's good for the world. I think for the workforce in North America, certainly in the short run, not so clearly. Because yes, we get to buy cheap goods from overseas, but our sort of lock on highly compensated, highly productive jobs is going away. And the idea that you could have a single family home with a nice commute in a beautiful place like Vancouver, it was a great run of it.
Yeah.
But I don't see how somebody with a moderate education, decent level of human capital, hardworking, that's not enough. I mean, look at China and India and Nigeria. I mean, you've got people who work themselves to the bone and live in heinous, god-awful conditions. With globalization, I don't see how just a little bit of hard work and a little bit of education is going to cut it for a single-family home in a beautiful location. So,
do you think we're already seeing that with, obviously the growing population, and then you're seeing all these schools close? I mean,
yeah, well, the school closures, I think, is just, a lot of that is just, in my opinion, a misplacement of priorities. Education is so critical. To underfund education when you're swimming in property transfer tax revenues, it's not my priority. Of course, I'm in the education business, so maybe I'm biased. But yeah, look, I mean, I wrote an editorial recently where I said, would you really choose to force families out of cities and thereby shut down schools while prices are escalating? And that's the overseas demand. We can address it with tax and try and level the playing field. If we don't do that, if we don't provide some preference for people who live and work here to buy real estate, long run, this is a playground for the rich. I think building condos and townhomes instead of single-family homes will help. I think that could buy you 20 or 30 years of affordability. But, our grandchildren, I think they're going to live in a very different world, and I think beautiful coastal cities are going to be really prized possessions.
So I guess I don't know if you would say this maybe in like a worst case scenario. I think like a recent report claims that 15% price reduction in Vancouver real estate will leave about 13% of mortgages underwater. Do you think our economy can withstand any decrease in home values?
A decrease is hard. Fortunately, we're stabilized, I guess, in that there's not that much construction despite the unbelievable strength of the economy. But people pulling out home equity loans, buying cars, updating their homes, etc. When that home ATM shuts down because prices aren't growing anymore, I think that'll be a real problem. Now, I think one bit of good news is probably the resource sector strengthening would be one of the things that would drive down prices here, because the loonie is largely an oil-based currency. So if natural resources get stronger, that's good for the economy, probably bad for local real estate. But if she clamps down, we don't have a rebound in oil, sort of the Chinese economy starts to go bad, and there's not the money flowing in, and there's no longer the fear of missing out because people think, whoa, the floor just fell out of this market. That could be just catastrophe of the universe. I lived through the States 2007 to 2009. It was a nasty time. And I don't see a 15% downturn. If the market goes bad, it can go big time bad. I don't think the elevator down stops at 15%.
So you think there's obviously always a possibility that it goes even further?
What I've said is if you pulled away Chinese buyers, certainly in the city of Vancouver, minimum 25% reduction in prices.
Which I think 25 would bring you back to what, January 2016 prices?
Exactly, like 25 to 50. So I don't think that's the likeliest scenario. But the nightmare scenario is out there, and hopefully governments are starting to plan for it. Obviously, we saw Trudeau come out. And I don't think it's a federal priority that a kid who grows up here wants to work in a yoga studio, live the dream. That's nice, and it's very sad that it's going away. But it's not really a federal issue. What's a federal issue is what if home prices collapse and banks start losing money. And I think it was the banks that brought this issue to the Prime Minister's attention.
It's good to hear. Anyways, Tom, Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Total pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking
Great
to you. So
chatting
you
with
guys
you.
heard it here first.